In every city, there's a place where the powerful decide who belongs and who doesn't. This is the story of a plaza, stolen not by force, but by paper and ink. And the people who refuse to be erased from it. You'll meet a war veteran with a service dog, a little girl selling cookies, a man sleeping in his car, and the truth about why they were pushed out. But what happens when the man they called homeless pulls out a lawyer's badge and turns the tables? Stay with me, because this isn't just a fight for a patch of concrete. It's a fight for dignity, for belonging, and for the kind of city we all deserve. And if stories like this matter to you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Winter mornings in Durham, a city that never truly slept but never seemed fully awake either, began with a pale, reluctant light, as if the sun itself was tired of looking down on streets worn thin from years of footsteps and storms. A thin veil of gray mist clung to the air, drifting lazily between the high glass towers and the narrow brick alleys, stirring whenever the wind slid through like an unseen blade. The cold didn't just bite. It settled in, burrowing through layers of wool and leather, a reminder that winter here was more than a season. It was a state of mind. On the plaza at the city's heart, polished shoes tapped a brisk rhythm across granite tiles, merging with the hum of voices, the muffled bass of music leaking from headphones, and the soft hiss of glass doors sliding open to welcome those in tailored coats and designer scarves. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee, baked bread, and expensive perfume, a blend that didn't reach the far end of the square. There, under the shadow of an old municipal building, sat a beat-up sedan with fogged windows. Inside, curled awkwardly in the driver's seat, was Nathan, hair unkempt, a few days of stubble shadowing his jaw, his face marked by the kind of weariness that came from losing more than you ever thought you could. The car was his home, his bed, his last fragile wall against the wind. On the passenger seat, a scuffed suitcase, a bundle of papers tied with twine, and a once white dress shirt, now yellowed at the cuffs. People walked past without slowing down. A few let their gaze linger just long enough to mutter under their breath, "Junkie," or just another failure. No one asked. Nathan didn't expect them to. In this city, the story people told themselves about you was more important than the truth. A few yards away, on a bench with one leg propped up by a brick, sat Harris, a veteran of wars fought oceans away. His army jacket was worn thin, the patches faded to the color of old paper. His eyes stayed fixed on some invisible point far ahead, the same way soldiers stare at the horizon when they're still halfway back in the places they left behind. Beside him lay Rex, a retired K-9 with a patchwork coat of grays and browns, each mark a memory of the field. Harris's calloused hand moved slowly over the dog's head, and Rex leaned in, pressing his muzzle to the man's knee, as if to say, "I'm still here." A group of teens in hoodies passed by, their laughter sharp in the cold air. One of them said, loud enough for Harris to hear, "Look, crazy old guy talking to his dog." They kept walking, their laughter scattering into the wind. Across the street, a 12-year-old girl stood behind a folding table stacked with trays of cookies. Her coat was too big, its frayed collar pulled up against the cold. But Amira smiled brightly each time someone glanced her way. Top of her class, lead voice in the school choir, daughter of a mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof overhead. She was selling cookies to raise money for a school trip to the museum. Most people waved her off. Some didn't bother to hide their skepticism. A woman in a fur-lined coat passed by, muttering to her friend, "Not sure I'd trust where that's been." Amira's eyes dipped for half a second, then the smile was back, the kind you wear when you've learned to swallow little cuts before they bleed. And then he appeared. Mid-40s, trim in a black suit, stepping out of a gleaming SUV. The weak sunlight slid across his sunglasses, throwing back a reflection as cold as the air. owner of a string of high-end restaurants, known not just for his menu but for the way he could thread his way through city politics. His gaze swept across the plaza, pausing briefly on Nathan, Harris, and Amira, not with curiosity, but with that blend of disdain and quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you'll never have to be them. The corner of his mouth tilted upward, almost imperceptibly, as if the world had been arranged so that men like him would always be looking down. The wind came again, carrying coffee steam, car exhaust, and something else, the faint, sour scent of poverty, the smell of clothes that hadn't seen a washing machine in too long, of mornings without breakfast, of sleep taken in cramped spaces. Amid the hum of commerce and the polished rhythm of the wealthy, those smells were easy to ignore. Easy to walk past, but not entirely invisible. Somewhere in Nathan's quiet gaze toward Harris and Amira, and Harris's hand resting on Rex's head, in Amira's stubborn little smile, there was something that refused to vanish. Fragile, but unyielding. Like a green shoot pushing through snow. Nathan kept his eyes on them, not with pity, but with the recognition of someone who'd once stood between two worlds, close enough to touch success, close enough to fall from it. And in that brief moment, he knew, whatever this morning was, it wasn't the end of the story. Something had just begun, even if no one else could feel it yet. The city had a way of swallowing stories before they even began. People hurried along, with their heads down, as if every second they spent looking at someone else's life might cost them something. Money, time, or simply the illusion that they were immune to collapse. Nathan knew that illusion well. He'd worn it once himself, back when his suits were pressed, his days were booked with meetings, and his nights were lit by the glow of courtroom victories. Back then, he could walk down this very plaza and not notice the men in frayed coats, the women pushing shopping carts of their belongings, the kids selling candy bars for school trips they might never take. Back then, he had been safe, or thought he was. Now, the engine of his car coughed every time he started it. The heater groaned like an old man with bad knees. He rationed the gas the way some people ration medication, saving it for nights when the temperature dipped so low the frost crept inside. And yet, from his spot on the curb, he could still smell the cinnamon from the cafe across the street, hear the easy laughter of people ordering drinks that cost more than his dinner. Harris shifted on the bench, his boots scraping against the concrete. A bus roared by, trailing exhaust that clung to the air. He didn't flinch. Years of holding a rifle in one world and holding nothing in the next had taught him how to sit still while everything moved around him. Rex's ears twitched at the sound, but he stayed pressed close. Harris whispered something under his breath, maybe to the dog, maybe to himself. Amira adjusted the display of cookies, lining them up as if order might make them more appealing. Her gloves were mismatched, one blue, one black, both worn thin at the fingertips. She caught Nathan watching and smiled, a real smile this time, unforced. It reminded him, uncomfortably, of his niece, who lived 3 states away and probably didn't remember the last time he'd visited. The man in the black suit checked his watch, impatience radiating from him like heat from asphalt in summer. He made a quick call, his voice low but sharp, each word slicing the air. When he hung up, his gaze swept over the square again. This time, it lingered on Amira. Nathan couldn't read his expression, but it wasn't friendly. The wind picked up, scattering a few of Amira's flyers across the pavement. She hurried after them, her boots slipping slightly on the slick granite. One sheet skidded toward Harris's bench, and Rex pounced, pinning it gently with his paw. Amira laughed, reaching to take it back. That was when it happened. A man in a security uniform strode toward them, his radio crackling at his hip. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of presence meant to make people step aside. His eyes locked on Harris first, then dropped to Rex. "Can't have that dog out here without a leash," he said, his tone clipped. "He's right here with me." Harris replied, his voice steady. He's trained. Served with me overseas. Doesn't matter. Rules are rules. The guard's gaze flicked to Amira, still holding the flyer. And you know selling without a permit. Amira's smile faltered. It's for school, she said softly. Nathan could feel the air tightening, like a rope pulling at both ends. People slowed their pace, sensing a scene about to unfold. The man in the black suit stopped walking entirely, folding his arms. Harris's jaw worked. She's not bothering anyone. And he patted Rex, saved a kid from a car last week. The guard's lip curled. So what? This isn't a dog park. And I'm not running a charity sidewalk. Nathan's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. He knew this wasn't the kind of moment most people would step into. Not unless they had to. Not unless something in them couldn't stay quiet. On the far side of the square, the church bells began to toll the hour, slow, heavy notes rolling through the cold air, as if the city itself was counting down to something it couldn't name. Nathan didn't move. Not yet, but something in him did. The wind seemed to pause, as if the square itself was listening. A man in a scarf paused mid-step to watch. A pair of teenagers pulled out their phones, the faint red light of recording blinking against the gray morning. Someone sipped their latte, with the casual detachment of a theatergoer, settling into their seat before the first act. The security guard squared his shoulders. Leash the dog or I'll call animal control. Harris's hand tightened around Rex's collar. The dog, sensing the shift, stood alert but still. He's not dangerous, Harris said, his tone controlled but carrying an edge. Rex has done more to save lives than anyone in this damn plaza. The guard smirked, his eyes narrowing as if the claim itself was a provocation. This isn't Afghanistan, old man. Here, you follow the rules like everybody else. It was a line Nathan had heard before, not those exact words, but that exact music. The tune of dismissal. The kind that told you your past didn't matter, that whatever you'd done or sacrificed existed in a different ledger, one no one would ever bother to read. Amira took a step forward, the flyer still clutched in her hand. He's a hero, she said, her voice trembling but clear. You shouldn't talk to him like that. The guard's head swiveled toward her. And you shouldn't be out here hawking cookies without a permit. He jabbed a finger toward the table. Pack it up. Nathan saw the flush rise on her cheeks, not from the cold, but from the humiliation of being scolded in public. She started stacking the trays, her gloves fumbling against the cellophane wrapping. Across the way, the man in the black suit tilted his head, watching as though he were judging a wine's finish, interested, but not invested. Come on, Rex. Harris muttered, starting to stand. But the movement seemed to embolden the guard. He stepped forward, placing himself between Harris and the bench, his bulk blocking the narrow path. You're not listening, the guard said. You're done here. Something in the air shifted. It wasn't just the cold anymore. Nathan could feel it, the slow burn of anger rising from the people who'd learned to bite it back for years. Harris stood straighter, his eyes locking on the guards with a steadiness that didn't require volume. I've been shot at, shelled, and damn near blown apart, Harris said quietly, each word clipped. But I'll be damned if I let you treat me like I don't belong on the sidewalk I bled to protect. The guard's jaw worked, but before he could respond, Rex gave a low, deep growl, not loud, but enough to draw every eye. From his car, Nathan's pulse quickened. He'd sat through depositions more hostile than this, but the stakes here weren't measured in verdicts or settlements. They were measured in the way a girl's shoulders hunched when she was told she wasn't welcome, in the way a soldier's voice cracked when his service was reduced to an inconvenience. He opened the car door. The creak of it seemed to slice through the air. Heads turned, including the guards. Nathan stepped out, the cold air knifing through his thin jacket. Is there a problem here? His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, riding the quiet. That had settled. The guard looked him over, the unshaven face, the worn clothes, the fact that he'd just climbed out of a car that looked more like a relic than transportation. Whatever measure he took, it landed Nathan firmly on the wrong side of respect. "Move along," the guard said. "Nothing to do with you." Nathan's eyes flicked to Amira, then to Harris, then back. "Seems to me it has everything to do with anyone who believes people deserve to be treated like human beings." A murmur rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. The man in the black suit smiled faintly, as if amused at the street's performance had just acquired. New character. The guard took a step toward Nathan. "Last warning," he said. "Move along, or I'll call the cops for loitering." Nathan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Funny thing about loitering laws," he said. "You actually have to prove the person's intent. Otherwise, it's just intimidation." That earned a few quiet laughs from the onlookers. The guard's eyes narrowed. For a moment, no one moved. Then the church bell struck again, a slow, deliberate chime that seemed to punctuate the silence. Nathan stood his ground. Somewhere deep inside him, he knew this was the moment the morning would stop being just another cold day in Durham. This was the moment it would start to mean something. The guard's radio crackled. "You want me to call this in?" a voice asked. He hesitated, eyes darting from Nathan to Harris to Amira, and to the small crowd that had grown larger than he'd realized. The man in the black suit finally stepped forward, his shoes clicking against the stone. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "this is a public space. Surely we can avoid unpleasantness." His gaze slid over Harris and Amira like they were stains on the pavement. Nathan caught it. "So did they. Unpleasantness," Nathan repeated. His voice low, usually starts with people deciding who does and doesn't belong. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind gusted, rattling Amira's cookie table. Rex stayed still, eyes locked on the guard. The man in the suit smiled, thin, cold. "Some people belong everywhere. Some don't." Nathan didn't look away. "Guess that depends on who's doing the deciding." The bell struck the half hour, deep and deliberate. The crowd held its breath, and just like that, the morning had shifted. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The crowd thinned slowly, as if peeling away from the tension in layers. A few lingered, glancing back with that restless curiosity people have when they sense something larger than what they've just seen. The man in the black suit was gone, slipping into his SUV without so much as a backward look. The security guard muttered into his radio, then stalked off toward the far end of the plaza. Nathan didn't move right away. The air still felt tight in his chest, though the confrontation had ended without a blow, without a siren. Harris sat back down on the bench, the weight of the moment pressing him deeper into the worn slats. Amira busied herself with restacking her cookies, but her hands shook just enough for Nathan to notice. "Thanks," Harris said finally, without looking up. His voice was gravel, scraped raw by years of shouting over gunfire and engines. Nathan shrugged. "Didn't do much. You stood there," Harris replied. "Sometimes that's enough." Rex leaned against Harris's leg, eyes flicking toward Nathan like the dog was measuring him. Nathan had the odd sense of being judged, not for his clothes or his car, but for something harder to define. The wind knifed through again, sharper now, carrying with it the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere uptown. Nathan zipped his jacket, thinking about the thin blanket waiting in the back seat of his car. He'd need to park near a streetlight tonight. It was safer that way. Amira glanced at him, curiosity in her eyes. "You live around here?" she asked. Nathan hesitated. There were versions of the truth he could give, a street name, a vague near the river. But something about her directness made him answer differently. "Close enough," he said. "I see this plaza a lot." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Me too." Her words hung there, And Nathan understood without asking that she didn't mean it in the same way. For her, the plaza was both opportunity and risk, a place to raise a few dollars for school, and a place to be told she didn't belong. A bus rumbled past, splashing through slush at the curb. Harris tugged his collar up against the cold. "Supposed to snow tonight," he said. Nathan nodded. "Guess we all better find somewhere to be." None of them moved. Above them, the glass towers caught the weak afternoon light, turning it into cold shards that cut across the plaza. The city kept moving. Horns, footsteps, the distant wail of an ambulance. But here, for just a moment, the three of them and the dog stood still in the winter air, bound by nothing more than the fact that they'd all been told, in one way or another, that this world had no place for them. It was the kind of moment that didn't look like much from the outside. But Nathan had learned that change, real change, rarely announced itself with fireworks. Sometimes it began in the quiet, in the frost-shadowed spaces between people who'd almost given up. Nathan found himself still standing there long after the crowd had gone. His breath rose in faint clouds, curling upward before dissolving into the gray air. Harris scratched behind Rex's ear, the dog leaning into the touch like it was the only anchor he had left. "You know," Harris began, his voice low, "Rex used to ride in Black Hawks, knew how to find wounded men faster than a medic." Nathan glanced at the dog, the milky haze in one eye, the stiff way he held himself. "And now?" "Now," Harris said, "he gets called dangerous for breathing on the wrong sidewalk." His lips pressed into a line, as if he'd already said too much. Nathan didn't push. He knew what it was to have the worth of your best years stripped away by someone who'd never once walked in your boots. Harris's gaze shifted to Nathan. "You don't look like a plaza regular." Nathan gave a half smile. "Guess I'm not. Guess I am." The truth, the real truth, was that Nathan had been circling this part of town for months, not because it was home, but because it wasn't. Because in places like this, you could disappear without vanishing completely. His days were a patchwork of odd jobs, legal advice traded for coffee or cash, nights spent with the seat reclined and a blanket pulled over his chest. Once, not that long ago, he'd had an office with his name etched in frosted glass. Once, his phone rang so often he dreamed in ringtones. But one bad client, one case that unraveled in ways he hadn't seen coming, and the debts stacked faster than he could climb them. Add to that his mother's illness, the hospital bills. And the bottom wasn't far away. Amira shifted her weight from one foot to the other, hugging herself against the wind. "My mom says this city's like a game of musical chairs," she sighed. "When the music stops, somebody's left standing. Usually it's the people without money." Nathan looked at her, surprised at the sharpness in her voice. She didn't sound like a kid. "Not exactly." "She's not wrong," he said. Amira's smile was small, but this time it reached her eyes. "She says we just gotta be fast enough to grab a chair." The sound of footsteps made them all turn. The security guard was gone, but a woman in a navy coat, some kind of city official by the look of her ID badge, was approaching. Her gaze landed on Rex first. "Sir, I've had a complaint about an unleashed dog in the plaza," she said. "He's trained," Harris replied evenly. "Better trained than most people I know." "I'm sure," she said, her tone flat. "But rules are rules." She took out a small pad, flipping it open. "Name?" Harris's jaw tightened. "You don't need it. We're leaving." "You can leave," she said, "but the citation still stands. And animal control will need to follow up." Nathan stepped forward before he could stop himself. "You might want to know," he said, "that under city code, service animals are exempt from leash requirements in certain contexts, especially when accompanied by a veteran." Her eyes flicked to him, narrowing slightly. "And you are?" "Someone who's read the law," Nathan said. For a moment, they stared at each other. Then she snapped the pad shut. "Keep him on a leash," It'll save you trouble." She walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the stone. Harris exhaled, slowly, rubbing a hand over Rex's head. "Trouble's all I've had since I came back," he murmured. And in that moment, Nathan understood, not the details, not yet, but the shape of it. The way the city could turn a war hero into a trespasser. The way rules bent easily in one direction and locked rigid in another. Snow began to fall, fine, dry flakes that dusted the plaza, clung to Rex's fur, caught in Amira's hair. The streetlights were already flickering on, hellos in the early winter dark. Nathan thought about his car, about the cold waiting inside it. He thought about the girl who sold cookies in the wind, the soldier who slept on a bench, and the dog who had once run into gunfire without hesitation. And for the first time in months, he didn't just think about surviving the night, he thought about staying. That night, the city exhaled in long tired gusts of wind that whistled between the buildings. Snow clung to the streets like a thin sheet of dust, glowing faintly under the yellow wash of the street lamps. Nathan had parked his sedan 2 blocks from the plaza, wedged between a delivery van and a rusted SUV. The metal was cold against his palms as he closed the driver's door and leaned back inside. The car smelled faintly of old coffee and the fabric cleaner he'd used 2 weeks ago, hoping to make it feel less like a shelter and more like a home. He pulled the blanket over his legs, tilted the seat back, and closed his eyes. The hum of the city was softer here, the occasional tire on wet pavement, a siren in the far distance, the muffled thump of bass from some bar down the street. Sleep didn't come quickly anymore. His mind kept replaying the day, the guard's voice, Amira's hands trembling over the cookie trays, Harris's quiet anger, the look in Rex's eyes when the woman in the navy coat had appeared. There was a weight to it all, heavier than the blanket over his chest. Somewhere nearby, a metal trash can clattered over. Nathan sat up, peering through the frosted glass. 2 figures moved quickly down the sidewalk, one tall, hunched, the other smaller, struggling to keep up. It took him a second to recognize the smaller one. Amira. Nathan shoved the door open. The cold bit instantly at his face, but he was already moving. "Amira?" he called. She stopped, her breath visible in the air, eyes wide. "Nathan." She looked over her shoulder. The tall figure had slowed, turning just enough for Nathan to see the outline of a man in a heavy coat, hood pulled low. He didn't speak, but the way he stood, angled toward Amira, cutting her off from the street, set every nerve in Nathan's body on edge. "What's going on?" Nathan asked, closing the distance. I was heading home. He's been following me since I left the plaza." Her voice was low, almost swallowed by the wind. The man's gaze flicked between them. "She dropped something," he said, his tone flat. "Then you can hand it to her," Nathan replied. His voice was calm, but he'd stepped in just enough to block the man's path. A sharp bark split the air. All 3 of them turned to see Harris at the end of the block, Rex straining at the leash. Harris's voice carried, hard and clear. "Everything all right here?" The man hesitated, then turned, walking away without another word. His footsteps faded into the hiss of falling snow. Nathan let out a slow breath. Amira's shoulders dropped, tension bleeding away. Harris reached them a moment later, Rex pressing his head against Amira's side. "Guess it's a good thing I decided to take the long way around," Harris said. Nathan nodded. "Yeah, good thing." But as they stood there in the quiet street, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had just happened wasn't random. There'd been something deliberate in the man's stare, something that didn't belong to a simple street encounter. The snow kept falling, settling on their coats, on Rex's fur, on the empty stretch of sidewalk where the man had stood. And somewhere beneath the surface of the city, Nathan felt the gears turning, slow, grinding, and inevitable. By morning, the snow had turned to a thin crust of ice along the curbs, crunching underfoot with every step. The plaza was quieter than usual, fewer commuters lingering, more heads bent against the wind. Nathan spotted Harris at his usual bench. Rex curled at his feet like a loyal shadow. Amira wasn't there. He was halfway across the square when he heard it. Two office workers huddled near the coffee cart, voices low but sharp with interest. Said she was almost grabbed last night. Little girl, sells cookies here. You serious? Swear to God. My cousin's girlfriend lives on 9th, saw it from her window. Some guy in a dark coat. Nathan slowed, the words sticking like frost in his ears. By the time he reached Harris, the veteran was already looking at him with that unreadable expression of his. Amira's home today, Harris said. Her mom's keeping her in. Says somebody from the city called about last night. Nathan frowned. The city? Harris nodded toward the far end of the plaza. And there he was, the man in the black suit, standing with the same security guard from yesterday. They were speaking to a woman in a red wool coat who clutched a clipboard like a shield. The man's smile was faint, but it wasn't the friendly kind. Nathan could read enough body language to see what was happening. A story was being told, shaped, bent. The guard gestured broadly, pointing toward the benches, the cookie table spot, then at Harris himself. Within minutes, the woman in red was walking briskly toward them. Mr. Harris? She asked. Harris straightened. That's me. I'm with the Department of Public Spaces. There have been concerns raised about safety in the plaza, specifically involving an unleashed dog and a child in the company of strangers late at night. Nathan stepped forward. That's not what happened. She didn't look at him. Regardless, we'll need to restrict certain activities here until this is resolved. No vending without permits. No animals off leash. And I'd advise avoiding the area after dark. Behind her, the man in the black suit adjusted his cufflinks, still smiling that thin, satisfied smile. Nathan's jaw tightened. This wasn't about permits or leashes. It was about control, about pushing certain people out of sight, making them easier to ignore. Harris met Nathan's eyes. No words passed between them, but the meaning was clear. The fight had just changed shape. Somewhere above, the winter sky hung low and heavy, the kind of gray that promised more snow. And Nathan had the distinct feeling that the next storm wouldn't just come from the clouds. By noon, the plaza had changed. Not in its architecture. The granite tiles still gleamed under a thin melt of snow. The coffee cart still steamed in the corner, but in its air. Conversations were quieter, glances sharper. People who had smiled at Amira yesterday now stepped past Harris without meeting his eyes. Nathan heard the whispers as he walked. Dog lunged at someone. Girl shouldn't have been out that late. Security says the vet gets aggressive when you talk to him. None of it was true, not in the way they meant. But in a city like Durham, truth was less about what happened and more about what people believed they'd heard. Near the fountain, the black-suited man stood with two others, hands in his pockets, looking like someone enjoying a private show. The security guard from before hovered nearby, giving Harris a wide berth but watching him like a hawk. Nathan crossed to Harris. They're not letting this go. Never thought they would, Harris said. His voice was steady, but Rex's leash was wound tight in his fist. Nathan looked at the gathering cluster of people, some curious, some hostile, all waiting for something to happen. They're trying to push you out, he said. They'll have to do better than this, Harris replied, but the edge in his tone wasn't confidence. It was the stubbornness of someone who'd been pushed too many times already. The murmur of voices grew louder as a woman in a tailored coat approached, flanked by two men in city maintenance uniforms. She carried a rolled-up poster under her arm. Without speaking to anyone, she walked straight to the bench Harris sat on, unrolled the poster, and began taping it to the nearby lamppost. Nathan stepped closer, reading the bold print. Public notice: unpermitted vending and animal control violations in Durham Plaza. Below that, smaller text detailed recent incidents, no names, but enough description to make it obvious who they were talking about. Nathan felt the cold crawl up the back of his neck. "That's libel," he said, loud enough for the woman to hear. She didn't look up. "It's a public notice. You can contest it with the Department of Public Spaces." The black-suited man chuckled softly behind her. The sound carried just far enough to land between Nathan's shoulder blades. Something in Nathan shifted. The cautious, keep your head down instinct that had kept him invisible for months burned away. He stepped forward, his voice carrying across the plaza. "For anyone reading this, you should know, this notice is a lie. The so-called unpermitted vending was a school fundraiser. The animal control violation involves a service dog that saved a child's life last week. If you want to talk about violations, maybe ask why city officials are spreading false information without a hearing." Heads turned. Phones came out. Someone muttered, "Who is this guy?" Nathan didn't care. He looked directly at the man in the black suit. "And maybe ask yourself why certain people want to make sure this plaza is only for those they approve of." The man's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Careful," he said, voice low but carrying. "You don't know how things work here." Nathan took a step toward him. "I used to. Maybe I still do." The square was silent except for the hiss of the fountain and the faint whine of wind around the buildings. Then someone clapped, a sharp single sound, followed by another and another. A small ripple of applause moved through the edge of the crowd. Not loud, but enough to draw the black-suited man's gaze outward. He turned away without another word, disappearing into the knot of people at the far end of the plaza. The woman in the tailored coat finished taping the notice, then followed. Harris exhaled. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yeah," Nathan replied. "I did." And in that moment, standing in the thin winter sunlight with Rex at his side and the notice flapping in the wind, Nathan knew something for certain. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about the kind of city Durham wanted to be, and he wasn't going to let them decide it alone. It happened 3 days later. By then, the posters had multiplied, taped to lampposts, bus shelters, even the side of the coffee cart. Each one was a quiet accusation, and together they turned the plaza into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. The snow was falling harder that morning, heavy flakes drifting down in slow spirals, softening the edges of the granite tiles. Nathan arrived to find Harris already there, Rex sitting close, both dusted with white. Amira stood beside them, bundled in a scarf, her cookie table empty. "They told me I can't set up here anymore," she said before Nathan could speak. "Said it's for my own safety," Harris snorted. "Funny how safety only comes up when they want you gone." Nathan was about to respond when a sharp voice cut through the muffled quiet of the snowfall. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to vacate this bench." The same security guard from before stood there, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 uniformed police officers flanked him, their breath steaming in the cold. Behind them, a small crowd was already forming, commuters, curious passers-by, the ever-present few who seemed to treat the plaza like a stage. "This is public property," Harris said. "Not today," the guard replied. "We've got an authorized event scheduled, and you're in the way." Nathan glanced around. There were no signs of an event, no tents, no tables, just a growing ring of people. Then he saw him, the man in the black suit, standing near the fountain with a cluster of city officials, talking and gesturing toward the bench like a director setting up his next scene. The officer stepped closer. "Let's keep this simple," one said. "Gather your belongings and move along." Harris's hand tightened on Rex's leash. "And if I don't, then we'll have to remove you." The words hung in the cold air. Nathan could see the phones coming out now, red record lights blinking. This was exactly the kind of confrontation someone wanted. Public, filmed, and framed to make Harris the villain. Nathan stepped between them. "He's not moving because he's not breaking the law," he said. "If this is about an authorized event, let's see the permit." One officer gave him a flat look. "And you are?" Nathan didn't answer. "Not yet." He kept his eyes on the black-suited man across the plaza, who was smiling that faint, knowing smile again. The second officer sighed, shifting his weight. "Sir, step aside. This isn't your concern." "It is," Nathan said. "Because this is about more than a bench. It's about making sure certain people are invisible. And I'm not going to let you." The officer moved in, taking Nathan by the arm. The grip was firm, not brutal, but enough to signal intent. Rex barked sharply, the sound ricocheting off the glass towers. Amira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Leave him alone. He didn't do anything." The crowd's murmur swelled. Phones shifted for better angles. Somewhere, a voice shouted, "Let the vet stay." The black-suited man's smile tightened. He turned away, speaking quickly to someone on his right. Seconds later, another group appeared at the far end of the plaza, men in matching jackets, carrying folding tables and banners. The event had arrived, and in that moment, Nathan understood. This wasn't just about moving Harris. It was about erasing him completely, replacing him with something shiny and controlled, something that fit the image the city wanted to sell. The first officer tugged at Nathan's arm again. "Last chance, walk away." Nathan looked at Harris, at Amira, at Rex, at the crowd now watching every move. His pulse was steady. "No," he said that the snow kept falling. But the line had been drawn. The officer's grip on Nathan tightened, but so did the noise around them. It started with one voice, a man in a worn coat, standing near the fountain. "Leave the vet alone." Then another, "This is his bench." Phones were raised higher now, the red dots of recording lights blinking like tiny signals of defiance. A woman in a knit cap stepped forward from the crowd. "I saw what happened last week. That dog saved a kid from getting hit. You people should be giving him a medal, not throwing him out." The officers hesitated. Harris stayed seated, but his spine was straight. His gaze locked on the man in the black suit across the plaza. Rex sat at his side, head high, as if sensing the weight of the moment. The black-suited man's smile thinned. He motioned toward the security guard, who began waving the event crew closer. Folding tables and banners moved in like an advancing line, bright colors meant to distract from the confrontation at the bench. Amira stepped into their path. She looked impossibly small against the row of men carrying tables, but her voice was clear. "You can't just shove people out because you don't like how they look." One of the men muttered, "Kid, move." "No," she said. That the crowd reacted, some with cheers, some with sharp intakes of breath. Nathan pulled free of the officer's grip, the movement sharp but controlled. "If you're going to arrest someone," he said, loud enough for the cameras, "arrest me. But everyone here should know you're not enforcing safety, you're enforcing an image." The plaza was silent for a heartbeat. Then the shouts began, "Let them stay." "This is wrong. Shame." The officers glanced at each other. The security guard's face flushed. The man in the black suit turned his back, pulling out his phone. Nathan could feel the tide shifting. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was resistance, raw and visible. And once people saw resistance, it was harder to unsee it. The snow kept falling, catching in Harris's hair, melting on Rex's fur. Amira stood her ground in front of the approaching tables, the crowd closing in tighter behind her. And somewhere, under all that noise, Nathan knew this was the moment the city's quiet cruelty had been dragged into the light. By the next morning, the plaza confrontation was everywhere. Clips shot from half a dozen angles flooded social media. Shaky phone footage of Harris refusing to leave the bench, Amira blocking the folding tables, Nathan standing in front of the police. Hashtags sprouted like weeds. Hashtag let the vet stay. Hashtag cookies for him, IRA. Hashtag Rex the hero. For every supportive comment, there were two that dripped with suspicion or disdain. Looks staged. Where are the permits? Bet the vet's just some drunk playing soldier. Nathan scrolled through them in the front seat of his sedan, the cold seeping through the glass. His name wasn't in any of the posts, no one knew it yet, but his face was. Every replay made him look like someone who had stepped into a fight on purpose. Which, he realized, was exactly what he'd done. Across town, Harris sat in the back of a diner, Rex at his feet. The owner, a wiry woman with sharp eyes, had given him a coffee on the house, but the looks from other customers weren't all warm. A man at the counter muttered something about troublemakers, loud enough for Harris to hear. Amira didn't come to the plaza that day. Nathan learned later her mother had kept her home after getting a call, not from the school, but from someone claiming to be concerned about her daughter's safety. The call had come from a blocked number. By noon, the black-suited man made his move. He appeared on a local news segment, standing in front of one of his upscale restaurants. His tone was smooth, almost regretful. "It's unfortunate," told the reporter, "but our public spaces have to be safe for everyone. When unpermitted activity disrupts that, we have to take action. I admire our city officials for stepping in before anyone got hurt." Nathan watched the broadcast from the diner's TV, jaw tightening. The man never mentioned names, but the implication was clear. Harris as the disruptive vet, Amira as the reckless child, Nathan as the nameless agitator. That evening, 2 city inspectors visited the plaza. They posted laminated notices on lampposts and benches. Temporary restrictions in effect. Loitering and unlicensed vending prohibited. It was the kind of language that sounded neutral until you saw who had actually applied to. Harris read one of the notices, his lips pressing thin. "They're not kicking me out," he said. "They're making it so I can't breathe here without breaking a rule." Nathan stood beside him, snow crunching under their boots. "It's not about the bench anymore," he said. "It's about making an example." Somewhere behind them, the black-suited man's voice floated across the plaza, smooth as ever, talking to a group of donors about revitalizing the public space. His laughter rose above the cold air, cutting through the thin, brittle quiet between Nathan and Harris. Nathan's breath misted in the dark. He knew then that this wasn't going to end with notices or polite arguments. If they wanted to push people out of sight, they'd have to push harder than this. That night, the snow turned heavy, muffling the city's usual clamor. By dawn, a thick layer lay over the streets, softening even the sharp edges of the plaza. Most businesses opened late, including the black-suited man's flagship restaurant at the corner. Nathan and Harris were there early, clearing a small patch of snow by the bench so Rex could lie down without soaking his fur. Amira arrived a little later, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her mother watching from across the street. That's when they heard it, the screech of spinning tires. A sleek black SUV was stuck at the intersection, back wheels half buried in a mound of plowed snow. The driver's door opened, and out stepped the man himself, dressed in a wool coat, expensive leather gloves. His expression was sharp, impatient, the way someone looks when the world refuses to bend on schedule. He tried rocking the vehicle back and forth, but the tires only spun deeper. A few bystanders passed without offering help. Some recognized him and kept walking. Nathan was about to look away when Harris chuckled under his breath. "Well, ain't that something?" Amira tilted her head. "Should we help him?" Harris's gaze stayed fixed on the SUV. "He wouldn't help us." But before Nathan could say anything, the man in the black suit spotted them. His eyes lingered on Harris and Rex, then shifted to Nathan. For a moment, something unreadable crossed his face. Not quite humility, not quite defeat, but the cold calculation of a man who knew when to use the tools at hand. He stepped toward them. "You've got a truck, don't you?" he said too. Harris raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like I have a truck?" The man's eyes flicked to Rex. That dog of yours, he's trained to pull, right? Could use the muscle. Nathan let out a short laugh. You want the dangerous, unpermitted service dog to save your luxury ride. The man's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. Do you want to stand here all day watching me dig it out, or do you want to prove a point? Harris glanced at Nathan, then at Rex. The veteran's mouth curved into something between a smirk and a sigh. All right, Rex, let's show him what dangerous looks like. 10 minutes later, with Rex harnessed to a makeshift tow line and Nathan pushing. From behind, the SUV was free. The man in the black suit dusted snow from his coat, murmured something that might have been a thank you, or might have been just an exhale, and climbed back inside as he drove off. Amira grinned. Think he'll remember that? Nathan watched the taillights vanish into the white. Oh, he'll remember. Question is, what he'll do with it. Harris gave a low chuckle, but Nathan didn't smile. He knew men like that didn't forget debts. They calculated them, and this one was already doing the math. The day after the snowstorm, the plaza looked like it had been carved out of ice and light. Sunlight bounced off the drifts piled against the benches, turning the air blinding and brittle. Nathan was sipping cheap coffee from a paper cup. Harris was adjusting Rex's harness, and Amira was sketching something in a small notebook, a habit she'd picked up when sales were slow. That's when a woman in her early 40s approached. She wore a quilted navy coat, boots dusted with salt from the sidewalks, and a knitted hat pulled low over her ears. In one hand she carried a canvas tote with the logo of the local newspaper. You're the folks from the Plaza video, right? She asked, glancing between them. Nathan exchanged a look with Harris. Depends who's asking. She smiled, not the thin performative smile they'd been getting from city officials, but one that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Name's Claire Ellison. I'm a reporter with the Durham Chronicle. And I think your story's bigger than a 30-second clip on social media. Amira straightened in her seat. You mean you believe us? Claire nodded. I've been covering public space disputes for years. And I've seen this pattern before. Safety concerns used as a smokescreen to clear out people certain businesses don't want around. She glanced toward the corner where the black-suited man's restaurant sat, gleaming in the winter sun. I'd like to do a feature. Tell it from your side. Harris's brows drew together. Why now? Because, Claire said, yesterday half the city saw you as a problem. Today, thanks to those videos, half the city's starting to wonder if you're a symptom of something bigger. That's a moment worth seizing, if you're willing. Nathan studied her. She had the posture of someone used to standing in tense spaces, but her eyes were steady, without the flicker of calculation he'd seen in others. You're saying you can change the narrative? I'm saying we can try, she replied. But you'll need to let me in. That means your full stories, the good, the bad, all of it. Otherwise they'll write you off as just another viral moment. The wind cut between them, cold enough to sting. Nathan looked at Harris, at Amira, at Rex sitting patient and still. Finally he said, all right, let's talk. Claire's smile widened. Good, I'll meet you here tomorrow. Bring coffee, and the truth. As she walked away, Amira's eyes lit up. This could actually work, right? Nathan didn't answer immediately. He watched Claire disappear into the crowd, then glanced at the black-suited man's restaurant. Behind the gleaming glass, he could see the man himself, phone in hand, watching them like someone studying a chessboard. Maybe, Nathan said quietly, if we move faster than they do. The sunlight caught in the frost on Rex's fur, scattering in a brief shimmer before melting away. For the first time in weeks, Nathan felt something warm at the edges of the cold, not victory, not safety, but the dangerous, fragile spark of possibility. The next morning, the plaza was still slick, with frozen patches, the kind that looked harmless until your feet slid out from under you. Nathan arrived first, nursing a paper cup of coffee gone lukewarm in the wind. Harris came a few minutes later with Rex, who trotted close, his breath puffing white. Amira followed, bundled in a thick scarf, a box of cookies under one arm. Not to sell, but as a kind of peace offering. Claire showed up right on time, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, a small recorder in her gloved hand. She didn't waste time. "Let's start with where you were before all this," she said, setting the recorder on the bench between them. "Not just last week, I mean years back, the road that brought you here." Harris went first. His voice was steady at the start, a soldier's cadence, dates, places, unit names. But when he got to the part about losing his best friend in Kandahar, the words slowed. He told them about the heat, the dust, the ringing in his ears that never fully stopped. About coming home to a welcome that lasted only as long as the parade. About the VA office where his paperwork vanished twice, and the apartment he lost while waiting for an appeal. Rex leaned against his leg the whole time, as if holding him in place. Nathan went next. He kept it short at first, law school, a promising start, a string of cases that went well until one didn't. The client who lied. The judge who didn't care. The legal fees that stacked up like sandbags before a flood. His mother's illness. The nights he'd sleep in the office because going home felt like wasting time he didn't have. And finally, the day the locks on his apartment were changed while he was at a hearing. Amira's turn came last. She hesitated, glancing at her mother, who had quietly joined them and stood just behind the bench. Her voice was soft but clear. She talked about her dad, who died before she was born, about moving apartments every year because the rent kept climbing, about the kids at school who'd ask why her shoes weren't the right brand, and about how selling cookies for the museum trip wasn't just about the trip. It was about proving to her mom she could do something for herself. Claire didn't interrupt once. When they finished, she clicked off the recorder and leaned back, her breath clouding in the air. "You know what all of you have in common?" she asked. Harris smirked. "Bad luck?" "No," Claire said. "You've all been told, in different ways, that you don't belong in the places you've already earned a place in. And you're still here anyway." The words hung there, heavier than the cold. Nathan glanced at Harris, then at Amira, then back at Claire. "You think people will care?" Claire zipped her recorder into her bag. "Some will. Some won't. But the ones who will, they're the ones who change things." Before anyone could reply, Rex's head lifted, ears pricked. Nathan followed his gaze and saw the black-suited man across the plaza, watching from just outside his restaurants. Glass doors. This time he wasn't smiling. The wind cut sharper as the morning wore on, driving most people indoors. Claire had packed up her notes and promised to start drafting the article that afternoon. Harris was adjusting Rex's harness when a shadow fell over the bench. Nathan looked up. It was one of the younger police officers from the confrontation. Days earlier, the one who'd stood silent while his partner tried to move Harris. His uniform cap was pulled low, and his hands were shoved deep into his jacket pockets. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Harris gave a dry chuckle. "That's new." The officer lowered himself onto the far end of the bench. "I can't stay long. I'm not supposed to, well, you get it. But I wanted to say, not everything you've heard about us is wrong, but not all of us are like that either." Nathan studied him. "So which are you?" The officer met his gaze without flinching, trying to figure that out. "Look, that day, I should have said something. My dad served, so did my uncle. Seeing you there, sir," he glanced at Harris. "I knew it wasn't right, but orders are orders." Harris snorted, but there was less edge in it than before. "Orders don't keep you warm at night when you know you let something wrong slide." The officer's jaw tightened. "That's why I'm here. Off the record, there's talk in the department about tightening enforcement in the plaza. And the guy in the black suit? He's got friends in places that can make that happen fast." Nathan leaned forward. "So this is your warning?" "Call it leveling the field," the officer said. He hesitated, then added, "If it comes to it, not everyone in uniform will be against you." He stood, gave Rex a quick scratch behind the ears, and walked off without looking back. Amira watched him go. "Think we can trust him?" Nathan shook his head. "Trust? No, but maybe we can believe he's telling the truth for now." Harris glanced toward the restaurant's glass doors. The black-suited man was gone. But somehow, that felt less like relief and more like the calm before something bigger. Snow began falling again. Fine, quiet, almost gentle. And in that stillness, the three of them sat side by side, knowing the next move wasn't theirs alone. Any more. It happened 2 days later, just before sunrise. Nathan was half asleep in the driver's seat, the breath inside his Cezanne turning to faint mist, when the pounding started, not on his window, but somewhere down the street. Voices rose, sharp and urgent. He climbed out, boots crunching over frozen slush, and saw the glow of flashing amber lights at the edge of the plaza. 2 city trucks idled there, their hazard beacons sweeping the snow. Men in reflective jackets were unloading steel barricades. Harris was already at his bench, Rex growling low beside him. "They're closing the plaza," Harris called over. "The noise, whole damn thing." A clipboard-wielding supervisor barked orders. "Move those barriers to the east side. We start fencing before the equipment arrives." Nathan strode up to one of the workers. "What's this about?" The man didn't look up. "Maintenance. In the middle of winter?" Nathan pressed. The man's jaw twitched. "Orders from upstairs. 2-week closure. Safety concerns." Nathan's stomach sank. Safety concerns. The same phrase from the posters, the news clips, the temporary restrictions. Only now, it wasn't about one bench or a vending table. It was the whole plaza. Claire appeared at Nathan's side, her breath coming fast. "I just got a tip this was happening. It's not maintenance. They've signed a private partnership agreement. When this revitalization is done, the plaza won't be fully public anymore. They'll have security authority to remove anyone at will." Harris's voice cut in, low but hard. "Which means people like us don't come back." Nathan turned toward the black-suited man's restaurant. The lights inside were on, though it wasn't open yet. And there he was, framed in the window, sipping coffee like a man admiring the view from a balcony he'd just bought. Amira ran up, her scarf trailing in the wind. "They can't do this. My school fundraiser, the winter choir performance, it's all here." Claire pulled out her phone, already dialing. "We can fight it, but we'll need proof. Leases, contracts, anything that shows the real deal." She looked at Nathan. "And we'll need it fast before they lock us out." As the first barricade slammed into place, the sound echoed through the plaza, a heavy, final note that seemed to seal the space off not just physically, but in spirit. Nathan looked at Harris, at Amira, at Rex. "Then we don't wait. We start now." For the first time in weeks, there was no hesitation in his voice. The cold cut sharper than any wind that morning. But none of them moved for a long moment after Nathan spoke. It was Claire who broke the stillness, snapping her phone shut. "All right," she said, "we don't have time for speeches. We split up. We move." Nathan's mind was already mapping the angles. "I can get into the city's public records office, if we're quick. The partnership agreement might not be fully sealed yet. Once it's filed, it's public." Claire nodded. "Good. I'll work my contacts at the Chronicle. There's a junior editor who owes me a favor. If we can get even part of that contract in print, we control the first narrative." Harris adjusted Rex's harness. "And me?" "Eyes on the plaza," Nathan said. "If they start moving anything in construction crews, private security, we need to know who they're working for. Get license plates, names if you can." Amira tugged on her scarf. "I can help Harris. People talk more to kids. They don't think we're listening." Harris shot her a look. The kind of wary glance from someone who'd seen too many good intentions run into bad endings, but after a beat, he nodded. Fine, you stay where I can see you. They moved quickly after that. Nathan peeled off toward the records office, Claire toward the subway. Harris and Amira lingered in the plaza's shadow, watching as the workers positioned the barricades in a neat, unbroken line. The black-suited man stepped outside his restaurant then, speaking briefly to the supervisor. The man laughed at something. He said, clapping him on the shoulder before heading back to the trucks. It was casual, unhurried. The easy confidence of someone who knew the ground beneath him was already one dot from across the street. Harris muttered directs, "Not yet, boy. We'll pick our moment." Amira scribbled in her notebook, the wind tugging at the pages. License plates, company names, faces. Harris watched her write, surprised by the steadiness in her hand. Nathan, meanwhile, climbed the stone steps of the records office, the heat inside hitting him like a wall. The clerk at the counter barely looked up when he asked for the latest. Filings on public-private partnerships involving city parks and plazas. You'll need to fill out a request, she said flatly. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. I know the law. And I know Section 14C says these documents are public on arrival, so let's not waste each other's time. Her eyes flickered, just enough to tell him he was right. She disappeared into the back, and in the stillness that followed, Nathan realized something. This was the first time in months he felt exactly like what he was trained to be, not a man sleeping in his car, but a lawyer about to go to war. The clerk returned with a thin stack of documents, clipped together so neatly it was almost insulting. Nathan thanked her, but he didn't sit to read. He carried them to a quiet alcove near the window, where the pale winter light pooled across the marble floor. At first glance, the paperwork was the usual legal camouflage, pages of boilerplate. About revitalization, public-private partnership, enhanced safety and community engagement. But halfway through the packet, a paragraph caught his eye. Clause 7.4, Security Oversight. Upon execution of this agreement, all security operations within Durham Plaza shall be contracted to Vantage Point Protective Services, Inc., with full authority to remove individuals deemed disruptive or in violation of posted regulations, without the requirement of due process under municipal public space guidelines. Nathan's pulse slowed, the dangerous kind of calm. Vantage Point Protective Services wasn't just any security company. He'd seen their name before, buried in settlement documents from wrongful removal cases, and one of their board members. He flipped to the final page. There it was. Signature. Leonard Price, the black-suited man. Not just a concerned business owner. He was financially tied to the company that would control the plaza. Nathan felt the edges of the paper bite into his fingers. This wasn't about safety. It was a business takeover, and a profitable one. If they could clear the plaza of anyone who didn't fit the image they wanted. He pulled out his phone and snapped photos of the relevant pages, sending them to Claire with a single message. It's him, direct link. Going public today? The reply came almost instantly. Meet me at Chronicle in an hour. We'll need Harris and Amira too. This is bigger than I thought. Nathan shoved the papers back into their clip and headed for the door. The cold outside hit him hard, but his mind was already running faster than his feet. Across town, the barricades were almost complete. Once they locked the plaza down, the revitalization would be a fait accompli. He called Harris. Get Amira. Meet me by the East Gate in 20. We've got proof, and we're taking it straight to the press. Harris's voice was flat, but charged. You sure you're ready to light that match? Nathan stepped into the street, the snow crunching like glass under his boots. Oh, I'm ready. The question is, are they ready for the fire? The east gate of the plaza was a bottleneck of wind and half-frozen slush. Harris was already there when Nathan arrived, Amira standing close, Rex pressed to her side like a bodyguard. Nathan didn't waste time explaining. He held up his phone, showing the photos from the contract. Claire's voice crackled through the line. "Hurry. I just pitched this to my editor. He's interested. But if we don't get it on his desk in the next hour, the story gets buried under budget reports and weather alerts." They moved fast, cutting through side streets to avoid the main road where the barricade crews were finishing their work. The Chronicle's headquarters loomed ahead, a mid-century glass and steel box that looked like it had been dropped into the city from another era. Nathan was halfway up the front steps when a black SUV slid to the curb. The rear door opened, and Leonard Price, the black-suited man, stepped out, flanked by two men in dark overcoats. "Well," Price said, his breath fogging in the cold, "isn't this a charming little parade?" Nathan didn't stop. "Get out of my way." Price smiled like someone indulging a child. "You're about to make a very expensive mistake. Those papers you're carrying, they're part of an ongoing municipal process. Leaking them to the press could complicate your situation." Harris stepped forward, Rex matching his movement. "The only thing complicated here is you trying to privatize a public space so you can line your pockets." One of Price's men took a step toward Harris, but stopped when Rex gave a low, warning growl. Price kept his eyes on Nathan. "You think they'll print your story? You think anyone will care once I've explained to the Chronicle that this is nothing but the ranting of a disgruntled vet, a street vendor without a permit, and—" His gaze swept Nathan from head to toe. "A man who sleeps in his car." Amira's voice cut through before Nathan could reply. "Better to sleep in a car than in a bed paid for by lying to everyone." Price's smile flickered. Just for a second, but it was enough. Nathan took the opening. "Here's the thing, Leonard, you can try to spin us any way you want. But once this hits print, your name is in ink next to the contract you signed. And people don't forget what they can screenshot." For the first time, Price's expression hardened. "Last chance, hand it over, and walk away." Nathan stepped past him. Harris and Amira closed behind. Rex didn't take his eyes off Price until they were through the Chronicle's glass doors. Inside, the warm air hit them, carrying the smell of ink and old paper. Claire was waiting by the elevators, eyes flicking to the SUV outside. "You have it?" Nathan held up his phone. "Better we have him." The elevator doors slid open on the Chronicle's newsroom, a wide, open floor humming with the muted chaos of ringing phones, clattering keyboards, and the constant shuffle of paper. The air smelled of ink and burnt coffee. Claire led them past rows of cubicles to a corner office with frosted glass panels. Inside, a man in his late 50s sat behind a desk stacked with folders, flipping through a stack of proofs. His tie was loosened, but his eyes were sharp. "This is Mark Geller," Claire said, editor-in-chief. Geller gave them a polite nod. "Claire says you have something worth my front page." Nathan placed his phone on the desk, swiping to the photos of the contract. Clause 7.4. It hands full removal authority of the plaza to Vantage Point Protective Services. And one of their board members is Leonard Price. Geller's eyes flicked to Claire. "You vetted this?" "I've seen the original pages," Claire said. "City clerk's office, public filing." Geller leaned back, studying Nathan. "You realize if I run this, we're accusing a very connected man of using city authority for personal gain. That comes with lawsuits, injunctions, maybe worse." Before Nathan could answer, the office phone rang. Geller picked it up, listened for a moment, then covered the receiver with his palm. His eyes narrowed. "It's Price," he said. "He knows you're here." Nathan felt the tension spike in the room. Geller's voice stayed level as he spoke into the phone. "Leonard, yes, I've seen it. No, I'm not in the business of killing a story because it's inconvenient. I understand your concern. Goodbye." He hung up slowly, the click loud in the quiet office. "Well," he said finally, "he just offered us a full-page ad buy for the next 6 months. If we hold the story until after the revitalization." Claire's jaw tightened. "That's a bribe." "It's also enough to keep 3 reporters employed," Geller replied. He looked at Nathan. "So here's my question. If I run this today, and he comes after us, can you back it up? With more than just a couple of pages?" Nathan glanced at Harris and Amira, then back at Geller. "If I can't, we lose. If I can, he does. Your call." Geller tapped a pen against the desk, thinking. "You've got until 5 p.m. to bring me enough to bulletproof this story. Otherwise it dies here." Claire's eyes met Nathan's. "That gives us 6 hours." Nathan exhaled, the weight of the clock pressing down already. "Then we don't waste a second." The Chronicle's lobby clock read 10:57 a.m. when they stepped back onto the street. The cold slapped them like a dare. 6 hours, Claire said, tightening her coat. "We need paper trails, witness statements, anything tying Price's money to City Hall." Nathan's brain was already breaking it down. "I'll go back to the clerk's office. There might be linked contracts with subcontractors. Harris, you and Rex hit the plaza again. Find anyone who's been approached by Vantage Point or pressured to leave." "Amira, I'm with Harris," she said before he could finish. Claire tapped her phone. "And I'm calling a friend at zoning. If there's been fast-tracking or skipped reviews, it'll be in those logs." They split. 11:45 a.m., city clerks and ex-Nathan's breath fogged in the narrow aisles of the archives. He pulled dusty binders, skimming for company names. Twice, a clerk passed by, giving him that look, the one that said "you don't belong here." But then his fingers landed on a sub-file, Security Subcontract Addendum, Durham Plaza Revitalization. 2 pages in, there it was, a payment schedule from Price's private holding company to Vantage Point, 6 figures, front-loaded, before a single barricade went UP 12:32 p.m. Plaza Harris stood under the half-finished fencing, Rex sitting at his feet. A food vendor he knew, Miguel, leaned over his cart. "They came last week," Miguel whispered, glancing around. "Said after the fences, I could apply for vendor space. But the rent? Triple. I can't afford that." Amira jotted it down. "Did they give you anything in writing?" Miguel pulled a folded flyer from his pocket. Vantage Point letterhead. Harris took a photo and sent it to Nathan, 1:18 p.m. Zoning Department. Claire leaned over a receptionist's counter. Voice low. "You and I both know you can't approve a construction project this size without a 30-day public comment period." The zoning clerk avoided her eyes. "Sometimes exceptions." Claire slid her a printout from the municipal code, "Not for parks. Not without the mayor's signature." "And there's no mayor's signature here." A pause, then the clerk handed her a stamped document, provisional permit, expedited for revitalization, signed by an acting deputy, who'd previously sat on the board of one of Price's nonprofits. By 3:40 p.m., they regrouped at a diner near the Chronicle. Papers, photos, and phone recordings spread across the table. "This is enough," Nathan said, flipping through the stack. "Direct financial link, vendor testimony, and a zoning violation." Claire checked her watch. "Then we go now." 4:12 p.m., the Chronicle. They strode into Geller's office, laying everything on his desk. Geller scanned the papers, brows lifting slightly with each page. "All right," he said finally. "This is bulletproof." They didn't see Price until they stepped back into the lobby. He was waiting by the glass doors, coat draped over his arm, smile tight. "You think ink scares me?" he said softly. "Tomorrow you're still nothing. A vet on a bench. A kid. A man sleeping in his—" Nathan cut him off, stepping in close. "You should know something about that man sleeping in his car." From his wallet, Nathan pulled a worn leather case and flipped it open. Inside, gleaming under the lobby lights, was a laminated card. State bar license, Nathan Cole-esque. 2 years ago, Nathan said, voice steady. I was in courtrooms you couldn't buy your way into. And I can be there again, with your name on the docket. Price's mouth opened, but no sound came. Nathan smiled, small, sharp, and final. See you in print. The Chronicle's front doors swung open, and the cold rushed in, carrying them out into a city that, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel quite so indifferent. 3 weeks later, the barricades came down. It didn't happen with fanfare or ribbon cuttings, just the quiet grind of wrenches on steel, the clatter of fence panels hitting flatbeds, the muffled chatter of workers who didn't ask questions. By noon, the plaza was open again. Harris was the first to arrive, leaning on his cane at the east gate. Rex trotted ahead, tail high, sniffing the ground like reclaiming old territory. Amira skipped the last few steps, her scarf fluttering, a box of cookies balanced in her arms. Nathan came later, hands in his coat pockets, watching from the edge as the last barrier lifted away. Claire stood beside him, camera slung at her hip. You realize, she said, this isn't the end. It's never the end, Nathan replied. But it's a start. Amira ran up to them, grinning. We're setting up tables again. Harris says Rex can be our mascot. Nathan glanced toward the center of the plaza. The winter light caught the wet pavement, turning it to silver. People were gathering, a mix of faces, clothes, and accents, some familiar, some not. A guitarist was tuning up by the fountain. Harris raised a hand from across the square. For the first time since Nathan had met him, the man's shoulders didn't look weighed down by the whole city. Nathan stepped forward, the crunch of gravel under his boots. He didn't know how long the plaza would stay free, or how many fights they'd still have to take on. But right now, it was open ground, and everyone belonged. Rex barked once, sharp and bright, as if sealing the moment. And somewhere deep inside, Nathan thought, maybe I can sleep here tonight. Under the sky, not the roof of my car. The plaza is open again. No speeches, no headlines, just the sound of fences coming down, and people walking where they were told they didn't belong. The fight isn't over, it never is. But for now, this is ground they can stand on, together. And maybe that's the point, that some battles are worth showing up for, even when you know you'll have to fight them again. If this story moved you, if it made you think, share it. And subscribe. Because the next story might be yours.